I never expected my life to collapse because of a simple question from a child. Yet it happened on a quiet Saturday morning while sunlight spilled across my kitchen tiles and the kettle hissed like it was holding its breath. My granddaughter sat at the table swinging her little legs when she looked up at me, holding her mother's iPad with both hands, and asked, "Grandma, why are you in those old photos at the embassy?" At first, I didn't understand what she meant, but then she turned the screen toward me and I saw images I had not laid eyes on in decades. My younger face stared back at me from an official hallway lined with flags, the State Department emblem shining behind my shoulder, the navy blazer I wore every day pressed sharply, the badge clipped to my pocket, my husband standing beside me with that confident smile he deployed so easily in public. Something inside me cracked. My hand shook and the milk I was pouring spilled over the bowl. My granddaughter looked frightened and asked if I was crying, but I wasn't. I was remembering everything I had forced myself to forget. Those photos were supposed to be gone. My daughter had sworn she threw them out years ago because they cluttered the house, and she told people I was confused when I claimed I couldn't find them. Seeing them on that screen made me feel as though the past had crawled out of its grave and grabbed me by the throat. I whispered, "Sweetheart, where did you find these?" She shrugged and said she found them in a folder labeled old stuff on her mother's cloud drive. Her mother had saved them. She hadn't thrown them away. She had hidden them. And that was the moment I knew I had not been paranoid these last few years. I had been hunted, not by strangers, but by my own flesh and blood. For most of my life, I believed love could hold a family together. I believed sacrifice would be remembered and appreciated. I believed raising a child with tenderness guaranteed loyalty. I believed too many lies. In my younger years, I worked as an administrative officer at the embassy. Long hours, thick files, strict protocols, and a salary of $1,200 a month that barely covered our $700 rent. My husband, Jonathan, was an artist with expensive dreams and no ability to finance them. I supported us both. Then I supported our daughter when she came along. Every ballet class, every doctor visit, every private tutor came from the overtime hours I worked without complaint. I used to whisper to her that everything I did was for her future. I wanted her to have a life better than mine. But children do not remember the nights their mothers stayed awake sewing dresses because they couldn't afford new ones. They remember only the moments when something wasn't enough. My marriage was a quiet battlefield. Jonathan filled our home with paint fumes and broken promises. His temper simmered. His debts grew. Still, I stayed. When he died suddenly of a heart attack in the garage, the grief swallowed me, but the shock that followed nearly destroyed me. I discovered he had taken a second mortgage without telling me. $25,000. No art supplies. No projects. Just debt. My daughter blamed me. She said I should have controlled him better and that if I had been a stronger wife, we wouldn't be in that mess. I swallowed her cruelty because I loved her. I forgave her because she was my child. But something changed that year. She hardened. She began to see me as a burden. And I, desperate not to lose her, kept giving, kept sacrificing, kept shrinking myself to fit whatever shape she demanded. Years passed. I retired from the embassy hoping for peace, but peace never came. My daughter married a man who smiled like a salesman and watched me like a hawk. They bought a large, echoing house full of things they couldn't afford. When their debts piled up, they started visiting me more often. At first, I felt grateful. Then I noticed things missing, bills arriving late, my driver's license gone from my drawer, credit card charges I didn't recognize. I asked about them and they gently patted my hand, saying, "Mom, you've been forgetting things lately. It's normal at your age." They said it softly at first, then they said it with impatience, then with annoyance, then with a kind of practiced pity that made my skin crawl. Every time I hesitated over a grocery list or misplaced my keys, Rebecca seized the chance to reinforce the idea that I was slipping. And slowly, despite knowing myself, despite remembering the sharpness I once had at the embassy, I began doubting my mind. Maybe I was fading. Maybe they were right. Maybe I needed help. Everything changed the afternoon. I walked into the kitchen and heard them whispering behind the partially closed pantry door. My son-in-law said she'll sign it. She's too tired to read anything now. My daughter said we need the lawyer to file by Friday or we lose everything. He answered that he could forge the first page if needed. Rebecca told him to make sure the signature matched because we needed full guardianship before the house went on the market. Guardianship, my house. Their voices were threading a noose around me. I leaned against the counter to keep from collapsing, my breath caught in my throat. Guardianship papers would legally allow them to control my finances, my home, even my medical decisions. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching two people I once trusted map out my erasure. The next day, Rebecca knocked on my bedroom door with a stack of papers. She smiled sweetly and said, "Mom, these are routine insurance updates. You just need to sign." I asked her to leave them on the table. When she walked away, the smile slipped from her face like a mask snatched off by the wind. I waited until she left the house, then examined the documents. They were not insurance forms. They were guardianship petitions disguised with cover pages. I saw my name typed next to words like incapacitated and unable to manage personal affairs. I sat in my chair until sunset, shaking, gripping the papers until the edges cut my palms. That night, I heard them downstairs arguing again. Rebecca asked what if she fights this, what if someone believes her, and my son-in-law said she won't make it to the hearing. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart pounding. Rebecca asked what he meant, and he said, "Just trust me." Then they went silent. Later that evening, I found a strange bottle in my tea cabinet, one I had never purchased. The seal was slightly broken. The chamomile smelled unusually sweet. My hands trembled as I held it. I didn't know whether it was poisoned or drugged or something else entirely. I recorded myself on my phone holding the bottle, saying the date, the time, and that I feared for my life. Then I hid the bottle in a plastic bag inside my coat pocket. The next morning, I made the bravest decision of my life. Instead of staying silent or confronting them, I went to the only person I could think of, an old colleague from the embassy, now retired but still sharp and well-connected. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't question my sanity. When I finished, he said, "You're not confused. You're in danger." The next day, a small package arrived at my door. Inside were a tiny hidden camera and a USB drive. His notes said, "Record everything. Don't act yet. Build evidence." For 2 weeks, I lived as a shadow in that house. I hid cameras in the vent, the living room plant, a tissue box. I copied files from their home computer onto the USB. I printed emails. I sifted through their trash when they slept. I found bank statements showing they had applied for loans in my name. I found an unsigned life insurance form listing my daughter as the sole beneficiary. I found letters from debt collectors addressed to my son-in-law. I found a spreadsheet with a date circled in red. My hearing date. The day they planned to take control of everything, and the recordings. Those cursed recordings. They revealed every layer of their plan. The forged signature practice sessions. The phone calls to the crooked lawyer promising expedited processing if they paid extra. My daughter saying mom won't last long anyway. My son-in-law joking that once they had guardianship, selling the house would solve their debt problem. They laughed about it. They laughed about my life like it was an obstacle they just needed to push aside. One recording made my blood run cold. My daughter's voice trembled as she asked, "What if she resists? What if someone asks questions?" And my son-in-law responded, "She won't be in any condition to." I had heard enough. That Friday morning, the deadline they discussed, I walked out of the house with every USB, every recording, every photo, every printed document stuffed into a tote bag. I went straight to a lawyer recommended by my old colleague, a young attorney with sharp eyes and a fiercer sense of justice. She listened to the first recording and immediately called the police. She told me, "You were right to run. You were right to be afraid, Within hours, officers arrived at my daughter's home. Rebecca screamed, insisting I was delusional, that I imagined everything, that I had always been unstable. My son-in-law tried to explain away the recordings but failed miserably. The bottle from my cabinet was tested and found to contain a sedative strong enough to incapacitate me. They had planned everything. They would have succeeded if I had doubted myself one day longer. The case moved quickly because the evidence was overwhelming. My daughter's lawyer withdrew before the first hearing. My son-in-law was charged with attempted fraud, attempted poisoning, and financial exploitation. Rebecca faced charges for forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy. During the courtroom proceedings, something unexpected happened. The judge requested my old embassy records for authentication comparison. When the files arrived, everyone saw it. My daughter had used my old State Department signature to forge documents. She had stolen my past to destroy my present. The courtroom was silent as the judge played the recordings. Silent as my daughter's voice filled the room with venom. Silent as my son-in-law's threats echoed off the walls. Silent as the bottle of drugged chamomile was displayed. But the silence broke when a small voice whispered, "Grandma." My granddaughter had been brought by a guardian appointed by the court. Her eyes were full of confusion and hurt, and when she saw me, she reached out as if she understood everything without needing to hear the legal jargon. Rebecca screamed that I had brainwashed her child. She tried to run toward the girl but was restrained. Her mask had fallen. All that remained was desperation and rage. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty, both of them. My daughter collapsed to the floor sobbing, but her tears meant nothing to me anymore. My son-in-law stared at me with hatred so sharp it could have slit my throat. Yet I felt nothing but relief. As the bailiffs led them away, I realized I was breathing fully for the first time in years. I moved out of that house of shadows and back into a small apartment of my own. A chosen family grew around me. Neighbors brought meals. My granddaughter visited every weekend. The courts granted me full protection and limited supervised visitation rights for Rebecca whenever she is released. I do not know if I will ever let her speak to me again. Some wounds do not heal. Some betrayals carve new shapes in your bones. Some truths once uncovered can never be buried again. Now I sit on my porch each morning, remembering the woman I once was. Not confused, not weak, not fading. I survived the people who tried to bury me. I found strength I thought age had stolen. I reclaimed the pieces of my life they tried to erase. I learned that sometimes love must be severed to save yourself. And I learned that blood is not always family. Family is who protects your dignity, not who steals it. If you are listening to my story, ask yourself this. If the people you trusted most turned against you, would you recognize the signs? Would you fight back? And if you had only one chance to save yourself, would you take it? If my story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. And if you want to hear more stories that reveal the hidden battles ordinary people fight every day, subscribe and stay with me. You never know whose truth might save your life next. I didn't know what healing looked like at my age. No one teaches you how to rebuild when the people who were supposed to love you become the architects of your ruin. For weeks after the verdict, I woke up each morning expecting to hear my daughter's footsteps in the hallway or my son-in-law's voice whispering at the bottom of the stairs. Trauma lingers even after justice arrives. Sometimes I would stand in my kitchen holding a cup of tea and feel the ghost of fear curling around me, reminding me that betrayal leaves footprints on your soul that don't wash away easily. But then my granddaughter would come barreling through the doorway on Saturday afternoons, her backpack bouncing behind her, and she would throw her arms around me like she was anchoring me to the world. "Grandma, can we bake the cookies again, the same chocolate ones?" she would ask. And in those moments I realized that healing isn't loud. It's a child's laughter echoing in a quiet home. I found a part-time job again, surprisingly. A small community library needed someone to handle the desk in the afternoons. When the manager asked if I could commit to 3 days a week, I hesitated, telling her I might be too old or too slow, but she shook her head and said, "You are exactly the kind of wisdom we need here." The first time a teenager asked me where the history section was, I felt something bloom in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. No one controlled me anymore. No one monitored my movements. No one watched my spending. I opened a new checking account, set up automatic bill payments, and felt a strange thrill the first day I bought myself a warm coat without asking anyone's permission. Independence is a strange thing. When you lose it gradually, you don't notice the pieces falling away. But when you regain it all at once, it fills your lungs like a breath you didn't know you had been holding. People in the neighborhood began hearing whispers of what my daughter and son-in-law had done. At first, I felt embarrassed, exposed, like my private humiliation had been turned into a spectacle. But then the whispers turned into something unexpected. Respect. Women I barely knew came to my door with plates of food or fresh flowers from their gardens. One woman, a widow, squeezed my hand and said, "You saved yourself. Most of us never do." I realized then that my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to every older woman who has been dismissed or overridden or erased by the people she loved. It belonged to every mother who thought love could fix what only truth can. Rebecca tried writing letters to me from the county jail. The first one was full of rage, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of turning the world against her. The second letter was shorter, angrier. The third letter broke something inside me. She wrote, "I don't know why I did what I did. Maybe I thought you owed me. Maybe I thought I deserved more. Maybe I just didn't want to struggle anymore. Please don't abandon me. You're my mother." I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back inside the envelope. I did not throw it away, but I did not respond. Forgiveness is not always a bridge you can walk back over, especially when the river below is filled with the weight of everything they tried to destroy. My son-in-law sent no letters. His silence was a relief. I learned from my lawyer that he would serve a longer sentence than my daughter, not only for the forgery and attempted financial exploitation but for the sedative found in the tea. I don't know what he imagined life would look like after they gained guardianship of me. Maybe he thought they would pay their debts and live free. Maybe he thought no one would question an elderly woman becoming confused or unsteady. Maybe he thought the world would simply let me slip away quietly. But evil forgets something important. It forgets that even old women have claws when pushed into a corner. Months after the trial, I received a box in the mail from my old coworker at the embassy. Inside were more photos from my years there, photos I hadn't seen since my husband was alive. There was one of me laughing in a hallway, another of me standing proudly next to a foreign diplomat, another of me giving a speech at a staff event. I held each one like a relic, a reminder that I had once been capable, respected, trusted. I realized something important as I sifted through them. My daughter never resented my age. She resented my strength. She resented the life I had before she was born, a life she could not control or claim. Those old embassy photos threatened the story she wanted to create, a story where I was fragile and unreliable and easily manipulated. Seeing those photos again made me understand the depth of her fear. If I remembered who I used to be, I would never accept the powerless role she tried to force upon me. One afternoon, as autumn leaves blew across my porch, my granddaughter asked me if I missed her mother. I took a long breath before answering. Missing someone is not the same as wanting them back, I told her. I miss the little girl I raised, the one who used to braid my hair and bring me wildflowers. But the woman she became made choices I cannot undo for her. My granddaughter nodded like she understood something far bigger than her years. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm glad you're safe." Those words melted me. Children see truth without needing explanations. As the seasons changed, I built a new routine. Morning walks to the library. Afternoons reading on my porch. Evenings writing in the journal my therapist encouraged me to start. I wrote about fear. I wrote about betrayal. I wrote about how easy it is for people to decide an older person doesn't matter. In those pages, I found myself again, strong, sharp, present. I discovered that old age is not the end of the story. For many of us, it is the moment we finally stop living for everyone else. One spring morning, I attended the final court hearing regarding long-term guardianship of my granddaughter. Rebecca's parental rights were temporarily suspended, and the judge needed to determine her future care. I sat nervously on the wooden bench until the guardian ad litem approached me and said, "The court is considering granting you shared guardianship." The words nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. I never wanted to replace my daughter. I never wanted to take her role. But I wanted to protect my granddaughter from the shadows her parents had dragged into her life. When the judge asked if I was willing to share responsibility, I answered yes with a steady voice. Rebecca watched from the far side of the room, her wrists cuffed, her face drawn. For a brief second, our eyes met. I saw regret there, maybe even love. But love without remorse is just nostalgia wearing a mask. I wish I could say everything healed perfectly, that my granddaughter grew up without scars, that my daughter turned her life around, that I forgave everything and moved forward with an unburdened heart. But real life is not a neatly tied ribbon. Some days I feel powerful. Some days I feel hollow. Some days I wake up grateful for my freedom. Other days I wake up missing the daughter I once had. Healing is not a straight line. It is a winding path full of bruised memories. One thing, however, remains clear. I am not broken. I am not confused. I am not the fragile woman they tried to convince me I was. I am a survivor. I am a grandmother who fought back. I am a woman who refused to be erased. And now, when I sit on my porch and watch my granddaughter play with sidewalk chalk, I feel the kind of peace that only comes after walking through fire. If you've stayed with me through this story, then hear the truth I learned the hard way. Age is not weakness. Silence is not safety. And love, when twisted into control, becomes something that destroys more than it protects. I survived because I listened to the voice inside me that whispered, "You are not imagining this. You are worth fighting for." And now I ask you, as you listen to my story, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have believed the lies or trusted your instincts? Would you have stayed silent or fought for your life? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts. And if stories of truth, survival, and justice speak to you, subscribe and stay with me. There are so many more truths the world needs to hear.